Now, I cannot believe this, Jane, but there is a book that is basically suggesting that school in and of itself, the way education is put together right now, is essentially just nothing but colonialism. It's about learning whiteness. This is part of the report here, which is a book called Learning Whiteness. Flying the Australian flag, commemorating the bicentennial and having a Eurocentric curricula are cited as examples of Australia's education system that's used to defend and fortify colonialism and white domination. There's also a story around today that there's a public school that's decided we're not flying the Australian flag anymore. We all know what's wrong with this, but how do we stop this garbage becoming some sort of text that can't possibly be refuted, being taught to every teacher in the country?
I read this. This was by two academics at Melbourne University in the Department of Education. I thought, and at the moment I saw these two academics, I thought, wouldn't they be fun to sit next to at a dinner party? Oh, not.
Yes.
Look, quite frankly, anybody that thinks that failing to teach our 6-year-olds critical race theory is a failure on behalf of the education system, get a grip. What we want is for our children to be able to read, to write, to add and subtract, to multiply. Ideally do long division, although, quite frankly, that was never really a good skill set of mine. But most importantly, to think for themselves. And that's not at all what this report is saying. Quite the opposite. It is indoctrination, apologist, divisive indoctrination. And that's not what we want from our education system. Parents do not care about this. They care about what their kids are learning at school and how they can afford to pay for the uniforms and the school shoes.
Absolutely. But James, this week, yet another piece of evidence that writing skills going backwards. This is on top of all of the stuff that's out of the pandemic, the 5, the 10, the 15 years before that. This week, the Prime Minister of Singapore was in Australia having a chat to Albo about green energy. You know what we should be exchanging with Singapore? How they run their schools.
Absolutely. The thing about, to use a term of the woke elite, gaslight, those of us who were educating our children at home for 2 years on and off, they can't gaslight us about the state of the school system anymore. I think one of the great opportunities that was before the Liberal Party in Victoria at this state election was seizing standards in state schools. I hope they've got a lot more to say about it, but they haven't said enough about it now. Reading this book, or looking at what's in this book, this basically more or less is a large chunk of the state school system in Victoria already.
Yep.
The history has arrived down here. We don't sing the national anthem at my school. We got rid of it because it wasn't inclusive enough. And then Morrison changed the words, but for some reason it never came back. Which for reasons I can't quite get my head around. We've had smoking ceremonies at our kids' school, even though it's supposed to be a secular school. It's free secular, and is the state school motto. And to be honest, there's a lot of stuff about First Nations or Indigenous people, which I don't object to, but it's almost to the exclusion of just about everything else, as far as I can see.
Yep.
They're not being taught Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Aztecs, or anybody else. It's a constant diet of the First Nations people. At our school, we've in fact renamed all the buildings with Indigenous names. After I don't know how they found out what their Indigenous names were, but every single one now has a new Indigenous name, which was they were awarded this year. Very exciting.
What a thrilling experience it must be for parent-teacher nights or school assemblies. I have the feeling I'm going to be feeling that for the next few years with my little one in the early days of primary school.